the way Rashi describes the majesty of the day we receive the Torah versus the way the Mechilta describes the majesty of the day we receive the Torah. Rashi says on the verse, and they camped there next to the mountain, Rashi says, it was there that they were like one man with one heart, and in every other scenario, there was argument. But the Mechilta says that whenever the Torah says they traveled, they camped, Mechilta says there was always an argument whenever they traveled, and here they were all together as one. So the Mechilta begins with discussing how every other journey was with a fight, and here they were together. And Rashi presents it the opposite way. Rashi says, here they were together, in every other scenario, there was an argument. So the simple meaning of the Torah that Rashi gives us derives the unique quality of being at Mount Sinai from the fact that Torah says, and they camped there next to the mountain. Rashi says the Torah is emphasizing the word there. That means that something special is going on. What was unique about the way they camped there? So Rashi says it was there at Mount Sinai that they were like one person with one heart. That's what the Torah uses the singular, and he camped there. The Mechilta, on the other hand, his source for the arguments that existed whenever we traveled, Mechilta's source is in the fact that the Torah employs the plural, they travel, they camp, they travel, they camp. Since the Torah uses the plural, they are camping, they're traveling, why is the Torah using the plural? So the Mechilta, which is a midrashic interpretation of Torah, says the plural is giving us a message. What's the message of the plural? The message of the pluralistic, they travel, they camp, is to tell us they always were in a state of discord. But Rashi doesn't subscribe to that interpretation. Rashi says on a simple level, they camp, they travel means that there are many people traveling, many people camping. So therefore Rashi's source is from the word there, and the Mechilta's source is from the word they camp, they travel. The difference between Rashi and the Mechilta is not only in their source, but also in the kind of arguments that we're talking about. According to the Mechilta, there were midrashic discord, midrashic differences, meaning people had differences of opinion. People have different ways of looking at things. But it wasn't hand-to-hand combat, there weren't fights, there weren't even verbal arguments. There wasn't any real discord. It was just people had different ways of looking at things. That's how the Mechilta understands that's the meaning of the Mechilta's words when it says there were machlokes. Or machlokes by the Mechilta means there were different ways of looking at things. That's also why it's possible that even the first journey from Ramses to Sukkot, which was in a blink of an eye, it says that journey was also machlokes. How can you have machlokes in the blink of an eye? There's no time for an argument. So from the Mechilta's perspective, the word argument over here doesn't mean literally an argument. But what it means is that there were differences of opinion. There were different perspectives. So when they were traveling, it might be at lightning speed. It might be in the moment they arrive from point A to point B. But in that, if we were to dissect everyone's feelings at that moment, we wouldn't find the same feeling. So therefore, the Mechilta says, what was unique at the giving of the Torah was that all the differences of perspective disintegrated, and everyone was together like one person with one heart. What was unique wasn't that they stopped fighting; they were never fighting. The Mechilta says the Torah says they always had different opinions, different perspectives. What's unique over here was that they were together as one heart. That's the Mechilta. When Rashi uses the word fight, Rashi's talking to a 5-year-old who understands the word fight, and he, on a literal level, there were fights, and the 5-year-old probably knows how fights work. 5-year-old is a 5-year-old. So when the Torah says that when it came to giving the Torah, they were together like with one heart. What that means is that they stopped fighting, which in a way is something more spectacular than what the Mechilta is saying. Mechilta is saying something very sophisticated. They lost their differences. They're all together with one heart. That's great. But Rashi is saying that even in the realm where there are arguments and fistfights, disagreements in ways that make people part from each other, even in that realm where there was animosity, and let's not use the word fistfights. It's not something that we deal with on a daily level. But let's look at looking the other way. Sometimes you walk into a room and someone looks the other way. They look the other way because they're polite, they're not going to say, they're not going to argue with you, but they look the other way. Where does looking the other way come from? Looking the other way comes from the fact that there's discourse, real discourse. Friedrich Rebbe says, it used to be, when people give Shalom Aleichem, you could feel the love. You felt the love. The person said hello, there was a Shalom Aleichem, there was a lot of love. Today the Friedrich Rebbe says, people kiss each other on their face, and they hate each other, but actually this hatred flowing through their veins while they're kissing each other on the face. So, yesterday we learned this letter of the Rebbe to the residents of Chabad, quoting Tzemach Tzedek, Aleph Beis stands for love is blessing. Ava Bracha. And the Rebbe says that there's a yardstick over here. It's not just where there is love, where there is blessing. Where there's more Aleph, there's more base. Where there's more love, there's more blessing. That's the Aleph base thing. So we're all interested in that from the base, right? We all like base. Base is good. Gashmistic base is good. Ruchnistic base is good. The more base we can get, we want it. So the more Aleph, the more base. You want more base, you have to have more Aleph. So the question is, how do you have more Aleph? So the Torah says over here that they all were together like one man with one heart at the giving of the Torah. They were united because of the Torah. The Torah brought them to have this unity. That means there's something unique about Torah that contributes to unity. By the way, if you ever want to interject and you say a question or a comment and keep me awake on the road, you're welcome. Anyways, so I heard from Rabbi Jonathan Saxel Shalom. He's once talking at actually the groundbreaking of the 770 building in Melbourne, Australia. Rabbi Sachs, he says in the Torah and the Talmud, it says, Talmidei Chachamim marbim shalom ba'elam. It is the Talmidei Chachamim who bring more peace into the world. Rabbi Sachs said, it's the only joke I know of the Talmud, the only joke. Talmidei Chachamim bring peace in the world. What are you talking about? Talmidei Chachamim are the ones who are arguing the most. In fact, not just arguing the most, but in a way, Talmidei Chacham have the worst arguments. By the Rebbe's wedding, the previous Rebbe gave out a memento for the wedding. The memento was a quote, a handwritten quote of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe said that most problems nowadays stem from arguments for the sake of heaven. There's an argument for the sake of heaven, then that's where the problems come from. You know why they're problems? Because if it's not for the sake of heaven, you wake up the next morning and you're like, all right, I made a mistake. I should relax. When you have a real reason you have a real agenda, that you have a principle behind that you feel is important, that's where problems start. That's where things get broken. That's where the Alter uses the words, most of the trouble we have in our time is because of arguments for the sake of heaven. So we're all, civil, nice people. We all subscribe to the Yachtas thing, especially subscribe to it, and at least intellectually. The question is, how do you go from the Aleph of your mind to the Aleph of your heart? So the base things don't just stay in heaven. The base things come in this earth. You don't want bases to be spiritual in heaven. This guy walks into a bakery and he starts sniffing the bread. So the owner of the bakery says, "Hey, dude, you sniff the bread, you got to pay." So he pulls out a $100 bill and he says, "Okay." And he's holding up the money, and the guy says, "What are you doing? If sniffing the bread costs money, then looking at the money is payment." There is an aleph in our mind, there's an aleph in our heart, and there's a bit of a gap between the heart and the mind. It's not always easy to bring down things from which are in our head to our heart. What was unique at the giving of the Torah wasn't that everyone subscribed intellectually that we shall be united. They were united ki'ish echa b'leiv echa, with one heart. Things went from the place of the mind to the place of the heart. Things moved. Things moved forward. And it was the Torah that gave us this. The Torah is what actually creates unity. Yes, it sounds like a joke, as Jonathan Rabbi Sachs said, but the truth is that not only does Torah create unity, but the only real unity is from Torah. This beautiful teaching from a certain Harav Brindle. It's printed in the Sefer called Mayanas HaNetzach. It says about Yisrael, Yichad Yisrael rejoice. In the first Aliyah, the one we're going to read today, Yichad Yisrael rejoices. So the Medrash Tanchuma says, Yichad could also be read as Vayihad. Vayihad means he became a Jew. Yichad Yisrael, Vayihad. Yisrael became a Jew. So why is Yisrael's Jewishness associated with his joy? He was happy because of all the good news he heard about the Jewish people being saved from Pharaoh. Why is his joy the verse that alludes to his Jewishness? Says the Sefer of Mayanas HaNetzach, quoting Rav Brindle, that the only way to be a Jew is with joy. And the only real joy is by being Jewish. It's very clear. Chapter 26 in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe says that there's a fight between two opposing forces within yourself. The only way to win is with alacrity. There's a small guy against the big guy. Just because the big guy is bigger than the small guy doesn't mean he'll win the wrestling match. He has to have alacrity. But what's the key for alacrity, says the Alter Rebbe? The key for alacrity is joy. Joy brings to alacrity. So to be a Jew, to win the Yetro Hara, you have to have joy. And the real joy that there is in the world, there's a real simcha that there is, period. The only real simcha that there really is being a Yid. There's no other simcha that has any similarity to the simcha of being a Yid. The beautiful teaching from Pelesh Tzadikim on a Rashi in Tehillim. Rashi in Tehillim describes translating a verse which talks about the yearning of a Jew for the Eibishter. Rashi uses the words in Tehillim, Ein Loi Dimyoi. There's no comparison. The simple meaning of the Rashi is that ordinarily, this verse, this context, these words, the grammar has a different kind of translation, and the translation of this word, this phrase, in this verse has a different translation. Ein Loi Dimyoi. There's no parallel in the entire 24 books of the Torah to the way this verse is presented here, where it describes the yearning of a Jew to Hashem. So the Admorei Pelin, the Pelesh Rebbe's explain that Rashi uses an unusual word to Rashi too. Rashi says, Ein Loi Dimyoi. Usually when Rashi points out that a certain word is unique, Rashi says, Ein Loi Dimyoi Bamikra. There's no comparison in the verse, in the verses of the Torah. Here Rashi says, Ein Loi Dimyoi. There is no comparison. Say that Admorei Pelin, say the Pelesh Rebbe, that there is no comparison of a Yid yearning to the Eibishter. There's no comparison, period. There's nothing else at all that exists that is parallel to the yearning of a Yid for the Eibishter. There's no other than Ein Loi Dimyoi. You can't find anything that's similar to a Yid's yearning for the Eibishter. So, in a similar way, there was a guy who wrote an article once, sent it to the Rebbe. He wrote it to the Rebbe, and he said that he's writing to them about nigunim, about song, and he says that song is a way for a person for the chassid to rejoice, a chassid is able to escape the hard life of a chassid through a nigun. That's what the article the person submitted the Rebbe wrote. The Rebbe edited the words, the hard life of a chassid, to the, I don't know exact words ever used, the hardships of life, but they ever took out of a chassid. To me, that means very simply, don't think just because you're a chassid, you have a harder life. The hardships of life, yeah, there are different challenges in life, but it's not that you're messed up because you're a chassid and therefore you sing songs. Nigun is a way to, yes, a nigun is something that helps a person leave negative energy and leave hardship. But don't think because you're a chassid it's harder. But on the other hand, don't think that the joy that you have in a mitzvah is something similar to the joys there are in physical taivas and physical pleasures. Don't think that you're. I believe it's Beditcha put it this way. You said if the Torah mitzvah is true, there's nothing that's even close. And if it's not true, chas v'sholem, what do they have anyways? A piece of chazer? They have a piece of chazer? I don't want a piece of chazer anyways. It's a different set. So what I'm trying to say is the kind of unity that the Torah gives us is a different kind of unity. The kind of simcha the Torah gives is a different kind of simcha. There is no similar simcha of the simcha of a yid and the Eibishter. There's no similar unity either of a yid and the Eibishter. There's no similar unity of yin between each other. The kind of achdus that is achieved through Torah is not that there's also unity through Torah. There is no similar unity, period, like the unity of yin through Torah. There is, the world doesn't have such a thing. I was trying to help this chassan Kala get married and get funds for the wedding, and this one lady was really working very hard, raising funds for the wedding. And I just reported to her that Baruch Hashem, everything's worked out. It was a very nice wedding. She said a very nonchalantly, very powerful thing. She said, that's Am Yisrael. That's us. That's the Jewish people. That's Am Yisrael. You're the word. That's Am Yisrael. That's who we are. That's who we are. Meaning, there's something about the Torah that gives us Ishecha b'levacha, like one person with one heart, that does not exist in any other setting. There is no other kind of unity that we have. There's no parallel. There's no similar parallel to it. The question is, on the surface, the Torah is anything but unity. That's what Rabbi Sachs was saying. The Torah, it's filled with disagreements, Abaya and Rava, and how do we? First of all, ideologically, the Torah presents things in a way there are supposed to be differences of opinion. And I guess the ruling follows one halacha, okay, but how does Torah contribute and create this unique unity that we're talking about, that there is no parallel to it? So before getting to the answer, the Rebbe first of all draws our attention to the other words in this pasuk, which give us some insight to where we're going. But since Dr.
Rabbi, where are you going?
Hopefully I'm not lost. Don't worry, I'm on the right. I'm on the right way. Are you on the right way too?
Hopefully, you're the one driving.
That's the question.
Right. Am I really the one driving? Okay. Anyway, so there are a lot of things we know in our minds we don't relate to in our hearts. Things we know in our head that we don't feel the same way. Yeah, you have to trust in Hashem. Everything's gonna be okay. A friend of mine was telling me about this. This guy came to him is very distraught about he left his job, and he tells this rabbi, he says, I left my job, I knew it was the right thing, I knew it was what Hashem wanted me to do. And now I have a trust in Hashem, I think it's going to be okay. But you know how he said that? He said it with tears in his eyes. Why the tears in his eyes? He's saying the right thing. Yeah, he had to leave the job. It was correct. If the Avish is going to help him, it's also correct. Why is he crying? He's crying because there's two different things in it. There's a heart and there's a mind. So the question is, yeah, there's supposed to be achdos, there's supposed to be unity. It's supposed to be. But how do we bring it, how do we make a telephone wire that will connect our hearts and our minds that we taka should be in the way of unity? If we tackle all of our differences, we taka should get along. What connects things we know in our mind, what we feel in our heart? Rabbeinu Neibishitz, he was once challenged by one of the other advisors to the king with the following question. The question was, what is greater? Is nature greater, or is intellect greater? What's a stronger force, our minds or our intellect? That was the question that was posed. Our nature, or our mind and intellect, or our nature? That was the question that was posed. Rabbeinu Neibishitz said our nature is a stronger force. So the other minister and Rabbeinu Neibishitz were arguing about this, and the king says, this is what we're going to do. We're going to have a day to demonstrate between you who is correct, who's not correct. We'll duke it out. You guys will have a chance to have your day in court to present your side of the argument. Okay. So Rabbeinu Neibishitz is a busy Jew. He's a leader of the Jewish people. So he forgets all about this argument, he forgets all about this day, he has to present his side. And meanwhile, the royal coach arrives, pick him up to come to the debate. Oh, the debate, what I'm going to say, I forgot that. He has a snuff box. So he grabs a snuff box, and he doesn't realize in the snuff box that he had a mouse had jumped into the snuff box. So he arrives at the royal court, and the other minister presents his side of the argument. His side of the argument was presented through an exhibit. What was his exhibit? The exhibit was, the way the story goes, he had trained a cat to become a waiter. And the cat was able to walk on two legs and carry a tray. And everyone's like, wow, look how the power of the mind. He trained the cat to be able to. And Mason is like thinking, what am I going to say now? And he opened up a snuff box, and he takes a bit of snuff to calm his nerves. And meanwhile, the mouse runs out. The cat sees the mouse. The cat drops the tray and the wine, and he runs to get the mouse. We have our own. Everyone has their own mouse. You know what I'm saying? We all have our own mouse. Yeah, the Abish wants us to have more aleph, more ava, more love, more friendship. Let's get together. And we want to have more bays, more bracha, and gashmias, and ruchnias. Yeah, we all had all that stuff. And then there's a little mouse that comes in and says, well, it has to be my way. Yeah, there's have to be, obviously so, but it has to be my way. Otherwise, I ain't budging, man. I ain't budging. That's the little mouse. So the question is, how do we navigate that mouse? So to begin to answer this question, the Rebbe starts to say that the Jewish people camped at Mount Sinai on the third day. It was the first day of Sivan, but the Torah emphasizes that they camped on the first day of Sivan, but the Torah was given after 3 days of preparation. And there are many other threes that are associated with giving the Torah. There is a people of three, Ken Levi Yisrael. There is a book of three, Torah Nevim Ksuvim. There are 3 different kinds of laws in Torah. And there are many, many other threes that are presented in Torah. The question is, if Torah is all about oneness and unity, so Vasepis, why is we're so into number 3? We should be into number 1. 1 is the number of unity. The answer is like this. The answer is, yes, 1 is number of unity. Yes, 2 is a number of separation and discord. 2 represents fragmentation. But the goal of Torah isn't that there should be a pristine oneness. The goal of Torah is that there should be a place of fragmentation. There should be a place of discord. And not just discord like the Mechilta says, but discord like Rashi says, simple discord. And this is what the Torah contributes and says that in the place of discord, in the place of fragmentation, in the place of argument, we should embrace each other. We should get along. We should let go of all the differences. We should embrace each other in the place of fragmentation. So how does that work? How do we bring us? How does the Torah do that? The Torah, everything in Torah has different. There's so many opinions of everything in Torah. How does Torah bring unity when there are so many different opinions? So, Rich Hashem, before we break for the day, I just want to share with you something amazing from the Ramban. Hashem will continue tomorrow. The Ramban said something which, for me personally, this answered a lot of questions I had about Yiddishkeit. The Ramban says the following: it says in the Torah that once the Beis Mikdash was destroyed, there's no more Ruach HaKodesh. There's no more divine inspiration. Now, although it says in Hayom Yom that every sefer that was written until the Shach and the Taz, until the conclusion of the Shulchan Aruch, was written with divine inspiration. So and the Rambam doesn't write any time limit to divine inspiration. The Rambam says there's always possible for there to be a prophet. That's for individuals. But before the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, it was more common for people to have prophecy. Okay? That's what the Rambam says. That's what the Hayom Yom says. But the Ramban says something unbelievable. The Ramban says, when the Torah says that there was no more prophecy, it says there was no more prophecy for prophets, but there was prophecy for the wise men, which means that the fact that Abaye and Rava agree to a certain opinion, why do they agree to why did the halacha follow Rav over Abaye? Why do all the sages say the Beis Hillel is correct? Beis Hillel was not as smart as Beis Shammai. The sages who sided with Beis Hillel were because they weren't as astute as the students of Beis Shammai. And yet the Torah says, follow the students of Beis Hillel because they're the majority. Why do we follow the students of Beis Hillel? Why does halacha always follow that direction? You know what Zev says? That's because they make life easier. Okay, fine. They make life easier. But why does God say make life easier? You know, he's not always making things easier. You know the Eibishter, right? So okay, the Eibishter is good, he's kind, but not always for easier. Easier isn't necessarily one of the things that we have a contract with Hashem for. So, says the Ramban, God guides the logic of the sages. God gives prophecy to the sages so that their wisdom, that their minds, their thoughts are guided to follow halakha a certain way. It's not only their minds that are gravitating towards the halacha being this way. It's God guiding their minds. In other words, the fact that their minds aren't as astute, and the fact that the number of Jews that can't figure out the wisdom of Beis Shammai are less than the number of Jews that could figure out the wisdom of Beis Hillel, that's because the Eibishter implanted divine inspiration to their minds so that they should have less intelligence. They should follow the halacha according to that way. So the halacha follows one opinion, doesn't follow two opinions, but that's the Eibishter orchestrates it this way. We'll see from tomorrow what this has to do with the number 3 and how this brings back to the unique unity of Eden. All right, great day, Dr. Bressman. Great day, Yonatan. Great day, Reb Zev. Any questions before we break for the day? Great day, Melchel Mordechai. Great day, Reb Berel. Great day, Reb Jeff.
My question is, where are you going?
We're there. I arrived. Don't worry, I arrived.
Classified.
It's like he can reveal our addresses, but he won't tell us where he's going in the car.